On January of 2017, Intel released the successor to their Skylake mobile chips across the entire lineup. I don't know, about 4 years on, these things are so popular that a lot of people are still daily driving machines that are equipped with these mobile CPUs to this day. So, are they obsolete? Well, we're going to talk about it in here. In front of me are two laptops, the IdeaPad 330S and the Aspire 3 that I talked about in my video right there. Now, these two laptops are about 2 generations apart. We're not counting the actual year of the purchase here, just the hardware in and of itself. The IdeaPad here has the Kaby Lake U chip, the i3 7020U, and the Aspire 3 has my beloved Ryzen 5 3500U. In terms of core count, this one has 4 cores and this one has 2. And in terms of pricing, they're pretty close. Well, relatively speaking anyways. So we're gonna pull up a classic benchmark here, Cinebench R15, and see how these two chips perform. Now, it's not a perfect, daily use kind of thing, but this is essentially one of the staple benchmarks that I use anyway. So let's click that. You see I've already had it run once, so bippity boppity bam. That should just launch, and we're going to continue here. They both have power breaks on it. Okay. While these two are running, I'm going to provide some context here. Before Kaby Lake, Intel enjoyed over half a decade of just complete dominance in the CPU space, without any competition in sight, particularly in mobile. Their CPU market share rose dramatically. This resulted in very monopolistic behavior, as you might expect, with the differences between generations being essentially just clock speed. This was exacerbated further by the fact that technology was continually improving, but Intel withheld that technology to those who want, or are willing, rather, to pay more for those technology. Now, Ryzen shook all of this and basically put an end to Intel's dominance in this regard. The problem with this generation right here, 7th gen, is that this was before their arrival, and their planning of it was probably also before Ryzen. This resulted in Kaby Lake, the entire generation spanning mobile to desktop, being essentially left in the dust because of how poorly they have been aging for the last few years or so. Like, to give you some perspective, the 7700K performs about as well or worse than a 10100 Wolf. In mobile, it's even exacerbated even further than it is on the desktop, for reasons that I will get into shortly. As I look at their test results, yep, 577, about as I expect, and it's still running. As expected, multi-threading prefers more cores, but even on single-threaded tasks where Intel is in the lead, it just doesn't. AMD takes the win in here in every single regard, so why? One of the fun things about this generation of hardware is that Intel was still locked in that monopolistic behavior. These i3 7th gen chips lack a feature that pretty much every Intel CPU now have: Turbo Boost. Turbo Boost, for those unfamiliar, is a turboing mechanism where the CPU can clock up as high as it can be, or at least on a set frequency, and then dial it down when the load is done, or if it hits a thermal or power limit. Turbo Boost is used by Intel essentially to boost up their CPUs from 1 or 2 or a couple of cores and just win in every single multi-threading scenario due to their now sky-high boost clocks. This one does not have it. It has a base clock of 2.3 GHz and then that's it. Whether it's running one core or both cores simultaneously, it's going to run the maximum at 2.3 gigahertz. This means that this chip, with its 2.1 GHz base and 3.7 GHz boost using precision boost and turbo core, can outperform this bad boy in every single regard, in both multi and single-threaded applications. Is it even done? Yep. 237 versus 577. The lead between AVX, I don't even want to talk about it because it's not a thing in mobile. So yeah, this thing that's absolutely crushed by a newer chip. But even compared to Ryzen 3, this thing is not going to perform as well, just because, as I said, it does not have turbo boost. This lack of turbo boost is really my main problem with recommending these CPUs. Bargain hunting for older stuff works. I mean, this chip is about 2 years old, but I still picked it up over 10th gen i3s just because of the overall scenario. Like, sure, it may consume a bit more power than those 10th gen i3s, but it has 2 more physical cores, and even if those cores are not as fast as those 10th gen i3s, it's still plenty fast for me, and for the graphics and the other specs department, this thing is about as good as I can get it to. When you step outside of a given generation though, there will be trade-offs, and actually sometimes a lot of trade-offs. I have a hard time recommending any pre-8th gen chips from Intel because of this very reason. Kaby Lake is just not aging well nowadays, and especially these lower end parts, without any turbo mechanism whatsoever, is just going to get slower and slower and slower to the point where it just isn't going to be able to keep up. Now, both these laptops are equipped with SSDs, and with them, quite honestly, I would not be able to notice the difference unless you told me, because they just feel pretty fast in daily workloads like web browsing and such. If I start video editing on these two using Adobe Premiere, I can slowly notice the difference as the timeline gets more and more and more complex. And when you're rendering the video using CPU encoding, you will definitely notice it. Also, OBS just kind of sucks on a dual core, so there's that. And there's some other quality of life issues in here as well. Now, Intel does have a leg up in there. QuickSync. Just for those unaware, QuickSync is a video encoding thing that essentially offloads encoding to the GPU, to the iGPU in here, which is a UHD 615 or 620 or whatever. It's super good, and compared to AMD's VCE, it's the one thing that I wish going from an Intel to an AMD platform. But anyways, what the point of this video is to highlight a couple of things. Number one, that while obviously modern gear will outperform old ones, they can still hold up to at least some types of workloads. As I said before, if you tried to blind test me and not show me any stickers or specs or anything, I would not be able to notice the difference. Number two though, is that when you do notice the difference, the delta between the two are going to get bigger and bigger. And number three, I just cannot recommend these i3 7th gen chips. I know some people are probably looking for laptops for the coming holiday season, and if you're bargain hunting, if you're looking at a 7th gen chip, maybe just try looking at a 6th gen chip. They're going to perform about the same, and you're probably going to get it for less. Or if you do have a bit more to spend, get an 8th gen CPU or a Ryzen one, because believe me, the performance that you will get will be better, just thanks to the fact that 8th gen chips have turbo boost across the entire lineup, and they have, in the high end anyways, generally more cores. And Ryzen obviously does not have any of the limitations that I've said about these i3 chips. It's just kind of a shame really, because Kaby Lake has sort of become prevalent. Like, about a third of any laptop that I've seen for the past few years or so are Kaby Lake chips, and basically i3 ones in that. And it's just unfortunate that they're aging this way. The architecture in and of itself is essentially not different from Skylake, so it's not really that big of a confusion for me. I know how it's going to age, and it's going to age very poorly, but the lack of turbo boost is just, come on. At least Intel has learned from its lesson now, or has been forced to learn its lesson, and I can actually now comfortably recommend Intel's current generation i3 lineup. Even if they're just dual cores, they're actually pretty close to performance to this and consumes a little less power. And of course, ground pounds this poor thing when it comes to single-threaded tasks, so oops. So there's that. So there you go. Your i3 7th gen laptop is probably fine, but if you're looking for a new one, just don't buy it. Get a 6th gen one, or again, if you have the cash, an 8th gen one, or a Ryzen Mobile. Bye.